Richard hadn't expected the question. He was sitting in his doctor's office for his routine checkup: cholesterol, blood pressure, a quick listen to his lungs. And as always, he waited for the inevitable question about diet and exercise. But then Dr. Mills, his physician for nearly 20 years, flipped a page on his chart and asked casually, "Are you still sexually active?" Richard blinked. "You mean with someone?" Dr. Mills gave a small, understanding smile. "In any form, Richard. Solo counts too." Richard scratched the back of his neck, suddenly very aware of the weight of the question. He was 67, widowed for nearly 6 years, and had quietly settled into a life of solitary routines: walks in the park, crossword puzzles, tending to his tomatoes in the garden. And yes, occasionally, in the quiet moments of night, he still touched himself, not with guilt, but not exactly with pride either, just quietly. "I guess," he said, hesitant. Dr. Mills nodded. "Good. That's good." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Good? Most men your age don't talk about it, but they're doing it, and some are too afraid to ask the real questions." "What questions?" The doctor closed the chart. "Like whether it's healthy, whether it's weird, whether it's safe for someone over 60 to still be pleasuring themselves." Richard crossed his arms, suddenly feeling defensive. "It's not like I'm hurting anyone." "No," said Dr. Mills calmly, "but some men your age don't know how to interpret the changes in their body. Sometimes it's not the act itself, it's what it reveals." That night, Richard couldn't sleep, not because he was embarrassed, but because something in the doctor's voice lingered. "It's not the act, it's what it reveals." He'd always assumed it was normal. Desire doesn't disappear just because your hair thins and your knees creak. In fact, some nights, the memories of younger years, his late wife's laugh, the way her hand felt in his, would come back stronger than ever. And sometimes that memory would carry him into arousal and later into quiet release. It was never about fantasy. It was about connection, even if just in his mind. But now the idea had taken root. Could his body be trying to say something? The next week, Richard went online. He searched articles, medical journals, forums for older adults. What he found surprised him. The act of masturbation past 60 wasn't just common, it was beneficial in many cases. It helped maintain pelvic floor strength, lowered stress, and kept circulation flowing in areas prone to decline with age. But the caveat was clear: changes in how the body responds could signal larger issues. One article from a urologist stated plainly, "Erectile dysfunction during solo activity is often the first red flag of cardiovascular decline, long before other symptoms appear." Richard stared at the sentence. He hadn't thought about it much, but it had been harder lately. Not just emotionally, physically. Erections took longer, felt weaker. He'd chalked it up to aging, natural wear and tear. But what if it was more than that? He booked an appointment with Dr. Mills again, this time with a purpose. "I've been thinking about what you said," Richard began, shifting awkwardly in the chair, "about how the body might be telling you something." "Dr. R." Mills looked up. "Noticing something different?" Richard nodded. "Takes longer. Doesn't feel the same." The doctor didn't flinch. He just opened the chart again. "Let's run a few tests. Nothing invasive. Just want to see how the blood's flowing." 2 weeks later, Richard sat again in the same office, this time staring at a printout of his results. "Your cholesterol is higher than last year," Dr. Mills said. "But what concerns me more is your vascular flexibility. It's reduced. That, coupled with slower erectile response, could indicate narrowing arteries." Richard's mouth went dry. "You mean my heart?" "Potentially. You're not in danger, but these early signs, especially the sexual ones, are often overlooked. That's why I asked." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Richard said, "So me noticing this, it wasn't just about shame or discomfort. It was my body trying to wave a little flag." Dr. Mills smiled gently. "Exactly. You listened. Most men don't." Richard changed his diet, added 30 minutes of walking every day, switched to olive oil instead of butter, cut down on red meat, took the prescription seriously. Over the next 3 months, he lost 12 pounds and felt stronger than he had in years. And the next time he touched himself, the difference was noticeable. Not because everything worked like it used to, but because he felt whole again. His body wasn't failing him. It had simply been warning him. He started seeing his sexuality as something more than a leftover habit from his youth. It was an indicator of health, a private barometer of vitality. He joined a local discussion group for older men, part wellness, part support. To his surprise, the topic came up almost immediately. One man, a 70-year-old retired teacher, spoke bluntly, "It's not about being pervy or trying to recapture some teenage thrill. It's about still feeling alive in your body." Another nodded, and knowing when something's off. By the end of the meeting, Richard felt relief. Not because he'd admitted anything embarrassing, but because he'd finally understood. Aging didn't mean silence. It meant paying attention. If you were over 60 and masturbating, it wasn't a punchline. It wasn't shameful. But it could be important. Because sometimes, what seemed like a small personal act could be the first sign your body was struggling in ways you couldn't see yet. And sometimes, it meant you were still fighting, still present, still listening, still claiming ownership of a body that had carried you this far. Still alive.